Hey, welcome to our weekly 3-minute therapy podcast. I'm Dr. Michael Edelstein, clinical psychologist, and my co-host, as always, is Nick Berry, who's an expert on the subjects we discussed here related to rational emotive behavior therapy, REBT. And we both learned it from Albert Ellis, who devised this approach in the mid 50s. We practice REBT on ourselves and teach it to others. REBT says that it's never situations themselves that cause our emotions and behaviors, but rather it's our thinking about it. And normally I outline the various thinking that people have that lead to emotional disturbance, but today we'll be going into that in much more detail. Mick, is there anything you'd like to add to that?
No, sounds good.
Okay, so when we talk about people having musts on themselves or demands on themselves, there are many aspects to that. And the one that we often mention in our podcast is a demand on oneself. I must do well and get approval, or else I'm no good. Others must treat me well, or else they're no good. And my life must go well, or else my life is horrible. But to get into more details, the demand on oneself, I must do well, could relate to personal performance. It could relate to how they live their life. It could relate to eating well, exercising, and those kinds of things. So there are various aspects of that must that people think of and disturb themselves with. Mick, did you want to add any other aspects to that?
Well, just that there are synonyms for must, demands, maybe you mentioned this, have tos, shoulds. It's mainly the concept that things have to be a certain way.
Right. That's a good point, that it's mainly the concept, because you could use must in a conditional sense. In order to get to the airport on time, I must leave in an hour. So that's really a conditional must. It's not the absolutistic must that we're talking about that lead to emotional disturbance. Nick?
Yeah, and also conditional musts are true and realistic, as we've pointed out. Irrationality is unrealistic, rationality is realistic. And therefore, if I want to get to the airport on time, I need to leave now.
Right. Yeah. And one of the reasons why musts never make sense, why they're fictions, is because a must implies you run the universe, you control all conditions, you're a perfect human and always do the right things. So there's no, those are all fictions. There's no way things have to be, must be the way you want them to be. Nick?
Yeah, and it isn't just that we run the universe, it's that the universe needs to be any particular way. Now, there are certain things in the universe which are dependable. If I jump out of the 10th story of a hotel window, I am going to be hitting the ground and most likely fatally. So if I jump out of the window, I we would we say I need to hit the ground or simply I'm going to hit the ground?
Well, we normally would say, I'm going to hit the ground, but you could, to illustrate the point we're making, we could say you must hit the ground, but that's in the predictive sense. That's another meaning of must. It could be used as a prediction. So if I jump out of the window, I must hit the ground. That's what I'm predicting.
And that would also be accurate
Yeah,
in most instances, unless you're wearing a parachute that can open that quickly or a jetpack.
that's right. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Now, another kind of must is a demand on others. Must Others must treat me well, kindly, fairly. And if they don't, they're no good. So it leads to damning others, and it also leads to hostility, anger, and resentment. So, and again, others are imperfect humans who act imperfectly, so there's no reason they must act in any particular way to make you happy. Nick?
And I was going to say, I remember once my therapist, Emmett Velton, pointed out, I said something to him. He said, yeah, that kind of encapsulates it. All mental disturbance boils down to believing reality should not be reality.
Yeah, yeah,
And when we're thinking about that, what makes somebody disturbed is when they have ideas that do not allow them to function in the realm of reality. There's the term dysfunction, like a dysfunctional thought or a functional thought, and dysfunctional thoughts are irrational and not realistic, whereas functional thoughts and behaviors are working within in the realm of reality.
right. Yes. An implication of a must is that it's absolutely awful if I do poorly or others treat me poorly or my life goes poorly. Uh, it's horrible. It's the end of the universe. And that never happens. Mick?
Well, and with the idea of something being awful, tell me if this is right. I would think almost all of the time is the thought, I cannot stand this situation. It's more than I can handle. It might be more than I want, more than I would really not want to do have to deal with. But and there I use the word have to, but when there is a situation that is unyielding, then I had best deal with the situation for my own good. So if I have a situation that is intensely against my preference, then I am not wanting to deal with it. But even though I don't want to deal with it, it doesn't mean I can't deal with it.
Yeah, right. And as you're saying, you're mentioning there are various derivatives of a must. So when you start with a must, it normally implies it's awful, I can't stand it, I'm no good or you're no good, and my life is horrible. So those are other problems with must. Right?
Yeah, and also that life is no good. I had a very close friend who killed himself, unfortunately, and I remember talking with some people who said, well, they never really liked it here. Well, where in the hell else could he be to like it? There is really all indication of if you don't like life, then the best idea would be to find some ways to find some things about it that you do like rather than just writing off the entire thing. What's tragic to me about this man killing himself is that he didn't have to do it and he could have learned to accept life and the difficulties in it and not feel that he needed to escape and get to some fantasy world of some other place that would be better.
Yes, yeah. If he apparently he didn't practice REBT on a regular basis. If he did, then a lot of his feelings of depression would lift. Yeah.
Well, actually, he did. I introduced him to REBT, and he did do it briefly and loved it, was ecstatic about it, but then he ceased doing it and
Yeah.
went in some other directions, figuring that this was not the best thing for him, and he pursued some very idiotic ideas, and I think that's what did him in.
Yeah. Another implication of a must is that bad things must not happen to me. And as Albert Ellis would say, life consists of one hassle after another. It always has, it always will, and there's no reason why it should not. Yeah.
And I think also with the idea bad things must not happen to me, ironically, when somebody has that thought, they're displaying low frustration tolerance. But inevitably, what happens, this is ironic, your life tends to become more difficult because you don't address the problems and avert the particular thing that you would not like to have to deal with. One of the best ways to avoid an accident, first step, is to be aware that you can have an accident. Therefore, if I'm going down the steps, some stairs, I had best remember, well, it's possible I could trip. And it's good for me to be careful as I go down the stairs. So I'm going to hold on to the handrail to keep myself from tripping and falling down the stairs. Whereas if I'm thinking I must not have an accident while I fall down the stairs, I absolutely must not. That's where my mind is, rather than thinking, hold on to the handrail so I won't fall down the stairs.
Yeah, right. Yep. Um, any other thoughts you had about must, Nick?
Yeah, yeah. Well, is it your, I think it probably is in your experience, tell me if I'm wrong, but that when people have low frustration tolerance, they tend to not take care of the problems and solving the problems in their life, doing the tasks that they could do to give themselves an easier life with less hassles, so that low frustration tolerance tends to lead to more frustrating situations. Would you say that's true?
Exactly. Yeah, it's bad enough that you have frustrating situations. Why make it worse by demanding you not have them?
Which takes away your ability and diminishes your ability to deal with correcting a situation, making the situation more pleasant. If I'm in a marriage that I don't like, if I'm saying, I can't stand this marriage, I can't stand this marriage, I'm not thinking about what is it that I could do to possibly make this marriage better. And part of what might be contributing to the discomfort of the marriage would be my own irrationality of thinking that I can't stand a difficult marriage. And I'm making the marriage more difficult by thinking I can't stand it. If I stop thinking I can't stand this, if I say, well, I am going to stand it regardless, what is it I can do to try to make this better? And first thing, of course, I can do is to recognize that nothing must go my way. I'm a fallible human being. I'm capable of being irrational. So let me take care of my own irrationality and be more pleasant for my spouse to be around, because I can, it takes two to tango, and I at least have some input into this situation. So what can I do to make this situation better?
Yep, yep. That's right. It takes two to tangle. And
Did you say tango or tangle?
no, you said tango. I said tango.
It takes two to tango. It takes two to tangle.
Right. Exactly.
Tangoing is much more fun, I've found, even though
Right.
I've never done it.
Hey, Mick, thanks for your great participation as always. And I also want to thank our tech engineer, Chris Rossini, behind the scenes. Comment below if you have thoughts, subjects you'd like us to discuss, questions, or you'd like to volunteer to be a guest. We'd be happy to have you. And subscribe to the 3 Minute Therapy podcast to do what, Mick?
To stay on the rational side of life as much as possible. We'll never stay there 100%, but to stay and return and live on the rational side of life to a great, great extent without demanding that we do so.
Right. And yes, and continue to come back to our podcast to get reinforcement.